Hi everyone. So we are to the lesson planning, lesson creation stage of this course, which is really, really exciting. So I wanted to talk you through a few things. So first of all, you'll see here that this is the lesson plan assignment. So just keep in mind, you're going to write your lesson plan this week, and then you will teach it next week. When you film it, or when you teach it, you have to film it. The filming is literally just you teaching the lesson. You don't need kids in it, really. I mean, you can get the back of their heads, but you don't want faces or anything. But let's talk about the actual lesson plan template. So this is the template you will use. So there's a couple of options. So first of all, well, not options, but there's two options. You can either use this template, or I have a template with comments marked up on it. So if you see this one, you'll notice, let me zoom in a little bit, that I'm trying to break out for you. So you're going to do your subject and grade level, the date of the instruction, your lesson title. The title can be whatever you want it to be. The standards. So this is not the in-task standards, but this is your content level standard. So for example, I'm giving the example of a standard here. So RL 910 1.2, determine a theme or central idea of a text and analyze in detail its development over the course of a text, including how it emerges and is shaped and refined by specific details, and then provide an objective summary of the text. That's one standard that maybe I'm addressing. So you're then going to have learning targets. These are usually started with I can statements, or students will be able to. I like I can. So students want to be able to know, I can understand the meaning of the terms theme and implied theme. So you'll notice this is something that goes directly back to my standard, right? I can make inferences on how the theme is developed over the course of the text, and then you would include the title. Right? Again, we're looking at how a theme emerges and refined by specific details, so that I can make inferences on how theme is developed is what the student will be able to do, or what they can do after the lesson. And then the last one is I can support inferences about theme. This would be done with typically text evidence. They're going to bring specific details from the text to talk through it. So this is your base to your lesson. This is what everything is going to be structured on. So then come down here, your lesson content. You'll notice these boxes are not super big. You can make them larger when you type. So just because they aren't super large, it doesn't mean that you should not type much. So you need three components to your lesson. You need a lesson introduction or a warm-up, lesson content, and a conclusion. Depending on your classroom and what you're doing, these are all going to look very different. But I'm a big fan of, for a lesson introduction, I like to use bell work. Basically, you're trying to ask students to activate their brains or recall prior knowledge, or maybe you're going to get them thinking about what we're doing that day in class. So if you're teaching a full 50-minute class, this should be no more than about 10 minutes. Then the content, this is the meat of your lesson. So you want to break down what you're teaching. You want to talk about the specific instructional strategies. Usually the best way to do this is you want to think about gradual release of responsibility, right? So a lot of the times the best way to do this is I do, you the teacher, then a we do, the whole class does something, and then it's an you do, the student then practices on their own. This might look different in all of your classrooms, and maybe you don't get to all three stages. Maybe you demonstrate and then they work in groups today. That's okay. Whatever it is, that's fine. And then the conclusion, this is where you have to wrap up the lesson and you get students to think about what they learned. Is there a final 5 or 10 minutes in like a 50-minute structure? Exit slips might be something. It might be you have them think about a question. Maybe you have a discussion. Maybe you just bring it back to whatever it was that you were talking about at the beginning. You want things to come full circle. So then you're going to come down here. Informal assessment. So how are you going to check for understanding? Are you going to be monitoring student learning? Is there something they are doing during the lesson? How will you know basically when you're walking around? What are those informal assessments? Then your formal assessments. How are students being assessed that day? What is it going to look like? It might be, whatever they produce that day, that's their formal assessment where you can say, hey, John gets it. Bob gets, 3/4 of it. But, on this piece, maybe going back to my example up here, right? If I'm looking at these, all of my students can understand the terms theme and implied theme. I noticed that most of my students can make inferences, but maybe let's say half are only able to support those inferences. So then I know where I need to go back and reteach, right? So whatever it is there. And then supports for a variety of learners. This is key, right? This is common on every single lesson plan that I've ever used in any district I've taught in. I've taught in 2 different districts. I've taught under several principals. It's always important to talk about how we're going to reach those variety of learners. So things you want to think about. It is not enough just to say, we're going to put a scaffold in place. I'm going to scaffold my instruction. How are you going to scaffold that instruction? Also, it's not enough to just say, if let's say the student receives extended time for their IEP, it's not enough just to say students will receive, extended time per their IEP. What are you going to do to help that student, reach that standard, reach that content instruction? So then here, instructional materials, what do you need? What do students need? If you're using, let's say, a manipulative, you want to list those here. If you're using a text, list that here. And then the last thing is, you'll see there's room here, is that you need to make an adaptation for online learning. If I were going to teach this in an online learning, how would you do it? You don't necessarily have to be teaching online, but you do want to discuss how you would do it. And then there's a section here if there's additional content or something that wasn't addressed that you want to make sure is documented. This is the place for that. So you'll see this hopefully should be an understanding of how this lesson plan works. If you have questions throughout the process, be sure you email. Otherwise, happy lesson planning.